Please give a warm Georgia Tech welcome to our guest, Mitch.
Good job. Thank you very much. Thank you. Good turnout for Halloween, huh? So I'm going to speak to a class later, and I'll be curious whether I have the same turnout. Well, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. And I'm always honored because I didn't actually go to college. So I'll start off my story. I grew up here in Atlanta, and I went to Southern Tech. I wanted to be an engineer, and I lasted about 6 weeks. And I realized, well, it just kicked my butt, because I realized I had never learned how to study. School would always come easy to me. I was excellent with math, excellent with science. And so I never really had to concentrate very much. And then I got to Southern Tech, and I realized I was not prepared. So I quit, and I thought, I'm going to quit. I'll get a part-time job. I'll do something, and then next semester I'm going to retool up. I'm going to go back, and I'm going to be more diligent. And I went to work at a company on the south side of the city here. It's called Dixie Tool and Die. And Dixie Tool and Die made stamping dies for the automotive industry. They did machining. And I started off at the lowest position. I started off unloading steel off of trucks. And then I moved up to running machines that were cutting the steel, milling machines, lathes, getting dirty. But I loved it. I was fascinated by taking a piece of metal and turning it into something that was valuable. Whether that be a mold or a metal stamping die or a part that went on an airplane or a car. And so because I was pretty passionate at it, I was decently good at it. And then, so I was like 19 years old. And I remember this day, I'm in the shop and I'm running this machine, and the owner comes out and he says, "Hey, you know anything about computers?" Now, this was a long time ago. This was like 1982. He says, and I said, "Why?" And I didn't. And he said, "Well, we just won this contract with Ford Motor Company to participate in the first all-digital car project. They're not going to produce any paper drawings. It's all going to be digital files, CAD files, computer-aided design files, 3D. And he said, I've kind of surveyed some of the other people that have been here a long time, and they're scared of computers. They don't want to get involved." And I'm like, well, I'm happy to do it. And next thing you know, I am this 19-year-old kid in Detroit, Michigan, sitting at Ford Motor Company, looking at these 3D models of this car. And this was like space-age stuff back then. And they're talking about the project, and then we were supposed to make metal stamping dies for like a fender and some window trim. And I thought, okay, I'm trying to act cool and calm, right? So I come back to Atlanta, and then this equipment shows up that we had bought. And it was this massive computer system and these CNC machines that are computer numerical controlled. If any of you have seen these, they're pretty cool technology where the computers drive these machines to do the cutting. And we had a very short timeline, right? So I got to participate in manufacturing at the point where digitalization really entered it, right? The computers were very expensive, the machines were very expensive, and the technology was very immature. So when we would create the programs from the software to run the machines, it didn't quite work. So I had to teach myself how to write software. So I started off with Pascal, a really old language that would modify these files, right? And then the machines wouldn't quite do what they were supposed to do at the time, so I'd have to modify, come up with attachments or different things to the machines. So I learned manufacturing from the ground up. Learned machining, programming, machine design, automation, how to make things move, a little bit of electronics. It's the right place at the right time, and being curious, right? And I've always been the kind of person that when someone believed in me or said, I know you can do this, I'm going to go to the end of the earth to make it happen. because I knew the owner of this small company that I worked for was depending on me. He had invested a lot of money, he had taken his contract, and he had depended on me to figure it out and to make sure that we delivered those metal stamping dies to produce the components to Ford Motor Company on time. Why he believed in me, I had no idea. I was playing so above my head. But that has been a motivator for me. And I think that's one of the leadership lessons that I took from that moment that I have applied to a number of other things. So I did that I worked in that company for about 6 years. And then I had a call from a recruiter, asked me if I would interview with Northwest Airlines. So I went to Northwest Airlines, and I didn't really understand why I was going there, but I went, and I met with the people that were running technical operations. And they told me that they had some challenges, that this was in the late 80s, and things were just going gangbusters in the aviation industry. And when they would try to get spare parts for airplanes or something, that when an airplane was broken, it was really tough. And so they would go to the manufacturer, Boeing or at the time McDonnell Douglas, and they would come back with 6 weeks, 8 weeks, three months lead time on a part. And that's not good in the airline business. That means you're canceling flights. You're losing a lot of money if you're canceling flights. And they said, we have this idea. We want to set up rapid manufacturing cells in the US, Europe, and Asia. We want to be able to take parts off of an airplane, reverse engineer them quickly if we can't find it somewhere in the market to buy it, get it on the airplane, get the airplanes back in the air. And we had learned about your background. I think that's right. So fantastic opportunity. So I went to the airline, set up these cells where we set up laser scanners, early laser scanners, coordinate measuring machines, sophisticated equipment and software, and we were able to really increase fleet utilization by keeping airplanes out of the hangar and back in the air, so not waiting for parts. So I did that, learned a lot, and so I finished that project, and then there were a few other things they asked me to look into along the way when it came to technologies related to maintaining airplanes, maintaining jet engines. And some of the stuff was obvious when I looked at it that there was room for improvement. And one of them was the jet engines have these fan blades in them, and the fan blades have that they wear when they go through the air, and they're pulling the air through the rain, sand, dust, causes erosion. It's very hard to measure those, but they always want to err on the side of safety. So they felt like maybe they were throwing away too many of these jet engine blades. And these blades are thousands and thousands of dollars a piece, and there's hundreds of them in an engine. So they asked me to look into that. So I come up with a system using laser scanners that would take a blade from a jet engine, scan it with laser beams, map it inside of the software, and determine if it was still in usable condition, and then figure out the mass of that blade based on that geometry, and then how to best distribute them in the engine in order to get the best balance condition so that when the engine runs, it wasn't too heavy on one side or the other. Then Eastern Airlines goes out of business. About that point in time, actually the Gulf War happens. Eastern Airlines goes out of business. Midway Airlines went out of business. There was a lot happening. And Northwest Airlines I was working for saw that as an opportunity. They wanted to pick up those routes. They needed to get airplanes in order to go pick up those routes. So I had a call from my boss, and he said, hey, you now have a new role effective tomorrow. You were a project manager, aircraft acquisitions. I'm like, what? I don't know anything about airplanes. And he says, nope, but you're the kind of guy, you figure it out, right? You figure it out, you don't let go, you're gonna get it done. Know we can trust you with this. Come see me tomorrow. So I went to see him, and he said, we need 30 airplanes. We need to put them in service as fast as possible to pick up some routes. And we don't have a lot of money. Airline is on the verge of bankruptcy. And so we talked about the resources that I had, and he said, this is going to be a really good experience for you because this is going to be an opportunity to lead something where you're not a technical expert. You don't know airplanes. You don't know all the things that go along with this. So you're going to have to assemble a team of people from finance, from aircraft engineering, from avionics, from flight operations, figure out how to put it all together, who to rely on, and how to trust information from different sources to put it into something. So the first deal that I did, I started looking around where do you get airplanes, right? And I found a broker in New York that owned some airplanes that were being turned in on lease from Alitalia in Rome, Italy. So we bought these airplanes for like $1 million a piece, and they were at the end of life. They were run out, the engines were at the end of life, the avionics was old, everything. So I bought these airplanes for $1 million a piece, and then it was like, now we had to get them overhauled, refurbished, new interior, new avionics, all this stuff. And we didn't have the capacity to do it. So different companies were calling on me that do aircraft modifications. And one of the companies was in Israel, Tel Aviv, Israel, called II, Israeli Aircraft Industries. And they said, if you'll bring these airplanes to Israel, we'll do all the work and we'll finance it. And then they brokered a deal where the US government gave us tax credits for going to Israel to do this. I thought, man, this is great learning experience. So I did the first 5 airplanes. I lived in Israel for almost a year with 5 airplanes. Great international experience. My first experience of really being outside of America. I grew up in Atlanta. Southern boy, deer hunting, the whole thing. And so it was really eye-opening for me. So we would take these airplanes, paid $1 million for them, put $5 to $6 million in overhauling them and getting them up to speed again, recertified, and then we would sell them for $18 to $20 million to a bank and lease them back. So it turned into a fantastic cash-raising strategy. So I did 30 airplanes all over the world, different aircraft modification centers. And then next thing you know, I learned a lot about airplanes, FAA Liaison, bringing together people, these different sources, meaning engineers, technical procurement, finance people, in order to figure out, who's telling the truth, who's on track, who isn't on track. And then I became director of technical operations for the airline, running a nice chunk of a major airline. And I was pretty proud. I thought, man, here's a guy, didn't go to college, scrapped my way up, learned, always trying to exceed expectations. And I'm an executive at a major airline. I feel good. Another one of those phone calls from a recruiter said, hey, how would you like to be a reseller, a value-added reseller of CAD/CAM software, the computer-aided design software and computer-aided manufacturing software? And I said, I've got a great job at an airline. I haven't used that stuff in a few years. That was back when I was working in a shop and stuff. And he said, it's a unique opportunity because we're representing a couple of companies that want someone to start a business and sell this software. And we've got about 2,000 customers throughout the South that we want to roll into this dealer to become like a mega dealer from Texas to the Carolinas. And I still wasn't so hot on it. And then they asked if they could come see me. They did, and they talked about it more. And I said, well, tell me about the numbers. And they said, well, these 2,000 customers that we're going to give you are all paying $1,000 a year in software maintenance, just to get the upgrades to the software. And the dealer gets 50% margin. So I'm like, wait a minute, so you're telling me I can start a business with $2 million a year in revenue and $1 million to run my business off of, like hire a couple people, rent an office? And they said, yeah. I said, fantastic, great. So I went back a few days later, quit my job at the airline, bought a little laptop computer, inherited 2,000 customers all across the South. So, and I did that. I hired a couple people, I got an office. This is awesome. I never thought I was going to be an entrepreneur. I had never expected it. right? But I did have a good background for it. With my manufacturing background, I'd learned some good business stuff. And so I start thinking, okay, now I got to protect this, right? I got to protect this business. I got to love my customers. And I start traveling throughout the South, meeting them, having little events, and I'm teaching them tricks about the software. And I noticed that one of the things that is happening is my customers, they don't really care about the software. They don't really care what I got to say. They like meeting each other. And my customers that are designing things are going off in the corner with my manufacturing customers, and they're talking, they're looking at drawings and say, hey, can you get me a quote on this? Can you make this for me? And then as I go visit my customers individually, my design customers are saying, we've designed this widget. Do you know anybody that can make it? And my manufacturing customer, we got capacity. Do you know anybody that needs anything made? And one day, I introduced a couple of my customers, and I'm driving out of the parking lot, and I heard this commercial for lendingtree.com. Request your mortgage, let lenders compete. And that was a Eureka moment for me. I thought, my God, what if I wanted something manufactured, and I wanted factories to compete? And so I went home. I couldn't let go of the idea. Registered a URL, long one, manufacturingquote.com. And I started writing the software. Now, I didn't know a lot about PHP at the time, but I taught myself and wrote this very cheesy website and no real database experience. So everything was a flat file. I got a flat file. And the next week, a few days later, I introduced it to my customers. And I thought, this is going to be a great community builder for my CAD/CAM customers. I didn't know it was going to be a business. Right? So I introduced it to them. They start using it. And I'm spending all week editing that text file, because every time somebody adds a comma to their company name or something, it's throwing off all the fields. And so I was opening that file, like in rapid succession, saving that thing, taking the commas out, right? So I finally quickly found a guy to help me with the database and do a better job than me. But it wasn't long, people started hearing about it. And people started calling me saying, hey, can I join your marketplace? I said, oh, is that what you call it? Right. And so I never wrote a business plan for it, so I didn't know it was going to be a business. And then so when they call me, I would say, do you need CAD software? Do you need CAM software for my customers? They're like, no, we already got it. And they maybe were out of my territory that I covered. And I said, well, okay, you know what? For my non-software customers, $1,000 a year. People start sending me checks. This is fantastic, right? So this is great. And then I start getting calls from all over the world. People in China, Malaysia, Bangladesh, Eastern Europe, Latin America. Can we join your marketplace? Okay, sure. And so I started having to hire more people to help me. I started having to build out infrastructure, add servers. This was back when you really had to build real infrastructure. And so I'm now spending at a rate that is more than I have coming in on the other business and more than I'm making sales. So I do it the old-fashioned way. I take out 8 credit cards. I cash in my 401k, every savings I have. I mortgage the house to the hilt, and because I didn't really know how to raise money, and I didn't have a business plan that I wanted to go raise money, and it was happening so fast I didn't have time to stop and do it, right? I love those credit card applications coming in the mail. Thank you very much. Yes. So I funded it the old-fashioned way, and then I started, the way the software business worked. They would send me, when I would sell something, I would collect the $2,000 for the software, and then I would pay $1,000 to them. So I did some creative financing. So instead of doing that like right away, it started being like in 20 days, and 30 days, and 45 days. So I started building up a balance there. And then I decided, well, I'm going to get out of the software business. So I found a company to buy that reseller business from me, take on the balance that I had built up there, as well as give me some cash. The next thing you know, so I'm in the marketplace business full time. So a couple years into it, business is going well. It's growing. I've got it to a nice break-even standpoint. I was telling them to invest like crazy because those were the days where you had to buy servers and infrastructure. It wasn't like the cloud that you have today. And once I started to look around, I realized there were a lot of competitors. But I had never stopped to look when I started it because I didn't know where I was headed. And then, there was some lean times there in the early 2000s, and all these venture-funded competitors that I had that had hundreds of millions of dollars of funding, they imploded because they couldn't build their business fast enough to catch up with their capital consumption needs, where we were sort of the little engine that could just come in along, sell a subscription to our service, buy a stapler, sell another one, buy a chair. And so we sort of grew in lockstep with the market. 2005, late 2005, we become the prettiest girl at the party. I started getting calls from strategic acquirers, from private equity firms saying, wow, you've created a marketplace in the world's largest industry. This is going to be big because we got the eBay effect early on, right? And people go where people are, and we want to buy, we want to buy your company. I think this is great because I need to pay off some credit cards, right? I'm taking very little salary. It's been hard. And I also knew I was facing some big challenges. I had to globalize. I needed to back up and rebuild the technology because when I started it, I didn't realize how complicated it was going to get. And you build this little thing and you add that on, you add that. Next thing you know, you got a mess, right? So I thought, well, this will be great. I'll sell the business. Somebody else can globalize it. Somebody else can rebuild it. I'll take my cash and go home. So I decided to go with a large public company from France. And we go through months of due diligence and planning and how we're going to integrate. And this is more money than I thought I'd ever see in my life. So I'm like, I have hit the jackpot. I'm going to pay off debt. I'm going to go to the beach. And we get about a week from closing the deal, the money coming to my bank account, and I get a call from a guy that says, hey, I work for Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon. Jeff would like to meet you. Are you going to be in Seattle? I can be. All right. The Pope of the Internet calls, you go, right? So I get on an airplane a couple of days later. I go to Seattle, and I show up, and I'm at Amazon, and I'm in the lobby, and they go, well, the receptionist, like, yeah, I'm here to see Jeff Bezos. And she gives me this funny look, like, yeah. She said, have a seat. I was thinking, all right, I'm getting pumped, right? This is like a pre-closing deal. One of my friends has set me up. So she sits there, and the lady calls, and she says, oh, okay, someone from Mr. Bezos' office will be down to greet you in a moment. I'm thinking, fantastic. Now I'm the coolest guy in the lobby, right? Everybody else filling out job applications. I'm going up to meet the man. So so I go up, and I still don't really understand why he called me. So I go in, he comes in, he's like, great to meet you, and he just starts peppering me, like, how'd you know how to do this? And I'm like, well, so I had to go through the background quickly. Like, I came up in manufacturing, I learned technology at an early age, I ran operations at an airline, that's why I learned all this stuff. And he's like, well, why did you choose the revenue model that you chose a subscription model? And I went through why I had chosen that. And he was just peppering me for questions for about an hour. I hardly got to talk other than just answer his question. And I'm still thinking, why am I on the firing line here? Right? And the hour goes by, and Jeff says, well, I got to go. Handlers come. He's out there. I'm thinking, what the hell just happened? And I leave, and I go back to my hotel room, and I'm thinking, oh, but as he's leaving, I think, okay. I said, can I get a picture? As he's walking out the door, so I go back and get a picture, and wish I would have taken my name tag off. It would have been cooler, right? So I got this picture, and I said, so I go back, and like an hour later, I get a phone call from this lady that works for him personally, and she said, hey, Jeff said to send you a term sheet that he wants to be in business with you. Did you guys talk about terms? I'm like, no, we didn't. And she said, well, let me talk to him. So she called me back and said, well, Jeff says that this is a very rare opportunity, that you are uniquely prepared in this crazy career you've had at the right moment in time in the world's largest industry, and that he wants to be part of it. And that we should figure out, a way to work together. So why don't you tell me what kind of investment that you would want to have if you want to sell some of the company? And I'm under NDA with this public company, right? So I said, that's fantastic, I'm flattered, but I don't need an investor. And she's like, okay. She calls me back and said, Jeff said he's not taking no for an answer. So this rocked along with a few back and forth where they sent us an offer anyway, and I turned it down. Not because it was a great offer. I'm marching toward this lot of money hitting my bank account. So finally, Jeff calls me and said, let's just talk. Why are you rejecting my offers? And I said, because I'm broke. And there's a lot of money coming into my bank account. And I'm kind of scared, right, that I've got to globalize a business. I've got to rebuild technology. And he said, fantastic. I've built one of the biggest internet businesses on the planet, and I can give you some advice there. You'll figure it out, like you've done everything else in your life. And he said, the money that you're thinking about selling this thing for you're going to see is trivial when you look at how big of an impact that this is going to have on the world. Right? And so I went out he asked me to come back to Seattle, and we were able to work a deal. Right? And he said, but you better get out of the other deal first. Right? So I called my lawyers, and they said, go with seller's remorse. So I called up the acquirer and said, I just don't think that I can go through with the deal. It's my baby. I want to continue to grow it. I don't want to become part of your large company. And they were not very happy, but they ultimately rescinded their offer. So then it came back into my lap. Globalize, rebuild. So I start thinking, okay, I got a marketplace running. I've got companies that are uploading their designs, and then manufacturing companies that are bidding on them, finding leads. That's a marketplace. I know the most important thing is to have people that want to buy. If you have people that want to buy, people that want to sell will come, right? So I thought, well, the next biggest body of buyers of manufacturing outside of America is in Europe. So I went to Europe, looking around, and wound up buying a company based in Switzerland that produced software as a service for large companies to manage their procurement of manufactured items. So I bought that company, Swiss engineered, Swiss technology, multilingual out of the gate. It says, great, I'll rebuild my marketplace on top of that platform. Then I knew the next thing I had to do was be predominant in Asia, the world's factory. So I started spending time in China, and wound up opening in late 2006. I opened up an office, a wholly owned foreign entity in Shanghai. Today I got about 100 employees in Shanghai. And from Shanghai, we take care of China, but also Malaysia, Taiwan, Vietnam, Korea, et cetera. So fast forward. So today, with MFGcom, we facilitate $3 to $4 billion a month in manufacturing sourcing between companies in 50 countries. And by volume, it's one of the largest internet sites in the world, by volume. Now, it's not a household sexy name because it's manufacturing, right? It's not a Groupon, but I tell you what, it's got more staying power because things get made, right? And we're at a really, really interesting point in time with the digitalization and technology convergence that is happening in manufacturing. If I think back to what, many years ago when I started my career, and what that software and the computers and the complexity, what it cost, right? Today, the software to do 3D design is very cheap and easy to use. The machine tools would cost $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 to take that code and cut apart, have now commoditized where they're a lot cheaper, right? And they're even getting down to the level where people are putting them in their homes. It's almost like the photo industry going from dark rooms to where people would send off their photos and wait a week, and then they would take them and drop them off and get them back in an hour, and now you just print them. That same type of a technology convergence is happening in manufacturing. And it's opening up some really, really interesting possibilities. So when everything is digitalized, when it goes from a CAD 3D design to CAM software into a machine that can repeat it, now manufacturing capacity starts to look like printers on a network, right? It's not like the old days where you had to have a guy that had lots and lots of skill running this very specific machine. Well, now I'm just looking for where capacity exists. Companies that have traditionally produced their product at one factory in a low-cost country, whether that be China or anywhere, and then shipped it to points all over the world, are now thinking about, how do I take this 1 million widgets and distribute them all around the world to where my consumers are and produce them in the local market and flavor it on demand to those consumers based on their taste. And that's the stuff that we're facilitating. So what I realized was, when people started referring to us as a factory in the cloud, I had no idea when I started this that I was laying the groundwork for something that would be global infrastructure for the world's digitalized manufacturing economy. And where it really started to hit home was maybe 18 months ago. I got a call from the Department of Defense, United States Department of Defense. And so they asked me to come, we had a meeting, and they talked about some of the challenges the Department of Defense has. So they spend a couple $100 billion a year buying parts and supplies and things to support the warfighter. And that's how they refer to it, as the warfighter. And they do it in a relatively old school, old technology kind of way. And they wanted to make that more modern. And they said, we're looking for a way to connect up the Department of Defense and all the things that we buy to the United States industrial base for a couple of reasons. And a couple of those directly hit on the ability for us to defend ourselves. Now, maybe you've seen pictures or in movies from World War II when the US government commandeered US industrial capacity. And they had everybody building tanks and trucks and bombs, regardless of what you did, they took it. And that was referred to as the ability to surge. The ability to surge. And they said, we don't have the ability to surge. What would happen if we had an event now, or something that happens, where we have to defend ourselves, and we don't have any production capacity in this country? So we need to build digital infrastructure that connects America's manufacturing. This is critical infrastructure, just like the national highway system, just like the air traffic control system, so that we know who has capacity to produce what at any given moment in time. And it looks like what you have built is you've already laid that infrastructure. I'm like, yes, I have. Right? It was so we went through a process, and they did a proposal, and we won that contract in April, and it's called Connecting American Manufacturing. And I'm pretty excited about it, because I think it does a lot for us from a Department of Defense perspective, from being more efficient with the taxpayers' money, being more reactive. But there's also, just like the highway system, just like the air traffic control system, there are commercial benefits that happen from that. Because manufacturing is important to our country, it's important to our economy, right? It's how we create wealth and a lifestyle in this country. And by allowing us to be extremely efficient, extremely precision with our manufacturing, doing it in a digitalized way, in a digital age, all of a sudden now it doesn't make a lot of sense to go to the other side of the world, to go to a low-cost country. Some stuff certainly should be made there because that's where the consumers are. But when you think about it in a digitalized way and it gets spread out, now everybody gets a piece of the pie. And I think this digitalization of manufacturing, facilitated by a factory in the cloud, is the new industrial revolution. It's good for our economy, it's good for our country, and I'm just excited to get up and go to work every day and building it out. So I will stop with my talk there and entertain any questions.
Factories or the manufacturers that are part of your network, do they make primarily industrial products or do they make consumer products?
It's primarily industrial product. And we've got hundreds of thousands of companies, like Black & Decker, Motorola, Whirlpool. Well, so it depends, right? It can be Black & Decker using us to get molds made for the plastic components that go into a power drill. Dana Corporation for drivetrain components that go into a car. It's everything. Boats, cars, airplanes, cell phone cases, you name it.
So, I guess my question would be then, if you make consumer products, could this be a marketplace that an entrepreneur might be able to use? Let's say an entrepreneur wants to do an initial order of products, obviously doesn't have the manufacturing capability to do it, so they're looking for contract manufacturers. I guess my question is, would this be a place an entrepreneur could turn to that would put factories in competition for each other to produce their consumer products?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Sorry if I didn't make that clear. Glad you asked that again. That happens every day. And one of the things that's really interesting, so a lot of the big, large companies use us for their production and manufacturing. But we have inventors and entrepreneurs every day. And we have companies starting up which become quite virtual, right? I have a couple of guys in Boston, a company called Bostig, and they design aftermarket auto parts. A couple of guys graduated at MIT. They never had to buy any equipment because they're just leveraging this virtual factory, right? And one of the guys came to visit me recently from Boston. He just wanted to tell me about how happy he is this exists. He said they were passionate about VW vans. And they started coming up with some cool bumpers and some things to customize these vans. And other people started wanting them. So he said, we didn't know how to weld or do machining or laser cutting. We didn't have the money. He said, but we made the designs, and we went to MFG.com, we uploaded it, and we started finding factories. And he said, now we never know how our sales are going to be. Are we going to need to produce more or less? And he said, so what you really have is a virtual factory of unlimited size that can scale up and scale down with no investment on my part. This is great. And I was like, wow, I love that. So I get the best analogies from the customers like that.
Hi, my name is Tamim Badwin. I'm a fourth-year business administration major, and I was just wondering if your revenue model has changed since you've partnered up kind of with Amazon. Do you take any commissions now, or is it still subscription?
Yeah, so two things. First of all, I'll say I'm partnered up with Jeff Bezos personally, not Amazon. And he always wants me to state that because Amazon's a public company and they don't have any interest in MFG. And the revenue model has not morphed very much. It's a membership-based, right? There's a couple of components to it. So the people that are doing the sourcing, buying the manufacturing, they use it for free. And then the factories that want to gain customers pay an annual membership fee, which ranges from a couple of $1,000s a year to $30,000 a year. Depends on the categories and geographies and the thing. And I would absolutely love to be in the percentage business, so taking a percentage of the transactions. What makes me nervous about that is a lot of the competitors that I had early on that went away, they tried that. Manufacturing is complex. Right? A lot of times there's collaboration that needs to happen. People need to talk about a drawing or a CAD model or have a phone call. And people wound up inadvertently cutting the marketplace out of the deal. Right? The marketplaces work when you can keep the parties somewhat anonymous, or if the transaction is so small it's not worth circumventing the marketplace. In large transactions, a few percentage points is a lot of money and it'd be worth going around. So we've stuck with that model, but I think over time we figure out ways that we become part of the transaction stream as we start to facilitate the payment and different things where it becomes more natural. But until now, building the herd, continuing to build the critical mass, to build the moat around the castle, the membership model has worked out really well. But I like the way you're thinking because you're thinking about the right thing.
Hi. Early on, you talk about how your earlier competitor, even with investor banking, is collapsed afterward, like they imploded. So do you think you benefit from not having those investors early on? And what do you think you will carry the company differently or do things differently if you do have those investors?
Yeah, fantastic. I absolutely think that too much money too early on is a curse, right? Because I think the companies that got a lot of funding, they hired a lot of people. They built a lot of overhead, a lot of bureaucracy. And all of a sudden you have this big burn rate and the business isn't quite ready to support that yet. And then over a while, the investors get tired of it continuing to invest and they just pull the plug. And because I think when I started this 12 years ago, it was kind of early in the cycle that manufacturers were ready to adopt doing business via the internet. And so my revenue started off very small. And as the adoption rate continued to happen, it got bigger and bigger. So we grew along with the adoption rate. My company got bigger as the market got bigger, as the market got ready for it. And one of the lessons I think I've learned from that is no matter how much money you throw at something to try to prejudice an adoption curve, I don't think you can significantly prejudice it. I think you can inflection, have a little bit of an inflection, but I don't think you can totally shift an adoption curve. People are going to adopt the way. And by dumb luck, I grew at the same rate as the market was adopting by staying lean and mean and funding it off of the revenues that came in. So, good.
Hi, I'm Jacob. I'm a biomedical engineering student. So recently I've seen a lot of interesting developments in sort of open source manufacturing, like cheap 3D printers, stuff like that.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you thought there's any future in that sort of do-it-yourself manufacturing, and if so, how does that affect your business?
Yeah, I think it's a really fascinating conversation. The whole the maker movement. There's cheap 3D printers now. There's cheap little CNC desktop mills and lathes, and that technology is really, really evolving. And I think you see the rise of things like Etsy, right, where people are designing little niche products and making them in mini home factories. Cottage industries are developing. I think it's fantastic. I think we're going to see a lot more of that, and that's what I mean when I refer about the new industrial revolution. I think we're seeing these micro factories that are going to start up, enabled by 3D printing. And for us, I think it's a good thing because I think that we become more of the cloud, which facilitates putting those people together at the right moment in time. Because we have some users today, which are people that have a product and they sell it on Etsy, but then they use us to figure out how to produce it, and find someone that does 3D printing and a little bit of CNC milling in the area near where they just sold the product. Fantastic. It's distributed manufacturing. So. Yeah, I think that's a key component of the new industrial revolution.
Hi, I'm Josh Campbell. I'm a graduate computer science and MBA student here at Georgia Tech. I'd just be interested to get your perspective on what you see as the blue collar opportunities that the first industrial revolution brought about, and is it that in this second kind of new wave of manufacturing that the blue collar worker like yourself ends up becoming the entrepreneur in all these kind of mini micro mills?
I think the ability to make something will always be a good skill to have. Right? There's a tremendous shortage of people that know how to make things in this country. Right? It just wasn't the path that parents sent their children down for good reason. Manufacturing left the country. Nobody wanted to encourage their children to go pursue work in manufacturing, become a machinist, become a tool and die maker. It just wasn't a good career choice. All of a sudden now, We have a shortage. And it's not what people think of, right? Because of the digitalization. People think of manufacturing as smokestack and welding and sparks flying. That's not what it is today. It's very computer intensive. It's 3D modeling. It's programming sophisticated machines, robots. I think it's cool. Right? I'm prejudiced, but I think it's cool. And we need people to get interested in that because there are job openings, many of them. Many of my customers tell me today their number one problem is finding people that have an interest and a passion and the right skill set with computer literacy, with math skills, the willingness to get their hands dirty, willingness to work. There's a shortage of those people, and I have hundreds of companies that use my service that would love to grow, but they don't have the right talent to grow.
Yeah, hi, Victor Leszewski, a graduate here from biomedical engineering, 2011. I just had a question. It seems that a lot of what MFG and what you guys are doing is providing accessibility to kind of identify the capacity. And I was just wondering, you mentioned you're in 50 countries in terms of the manufacturers, the buyers. For one, is there a certain, I guess, method to the madness in terms of which countries you're looking at? And the second, is this idea of accessibility something that you're saying that maybe in developing economies, maybe ones that don't have as established value chains, is it providing an opportunity maybe for startups, for some sort of economy to grow by having all of a sudden this access, because they'll have potentially access online before they might be able to have some of that manufacturing capacity locally?
Yeah, you're right. So the 50 countries, I mean, markets are very efficient inherently, right? And I can tell you, we didn't go to say, well, let's pick out these countries. And what happens is the market drives it. The buyers drive it. You know, when a large company says, we want to have this manufactured, and we want to have it manufactured in this country or this region for a strategic reason, then they start doing a lot of sourcing there, and they put it out, and they put it onto our system. They say, we're looking for, suppliers to produce this in X region. Well, all of a sudden, we start to get members in that region. So the markets work and are efficient. Conversely, one of the things we're seeing right now, a lot of companies are wanting to bring it back to America, right? For a lot of reasons. So there's a big resurgence to move back to America right now. But you're exactly right that it opens up opportunities for small businesses, the accessibility, right? I've been all over the world to companies that were very, very small in a village in some remote place. All of a sudden now they're connected and they're getting customers from remote areas of the world they never would have perceived, right? And it plays right into what's happening in the world today in manufacturing especially, is you can't be a generalist, right? You can't say we make chairs and podiums and cars and boats. You got to figure out what it is you do extremely well, be the best in the world at making that one widget, and then cast a really wide global net to find those customers. I have a friend here in Atlanta, actually, Phoenix Metal Stamping, that he was a Army Ranger, went to West Point, got out and took over his father's metal stamping business. And the business was doing okay, but they weren't making a lot of profit, but they were doing okay. And he decided to focus. And he said the thing that they made the most money on was U-bolts. These little bolts that are in a U shape, they have threads on each end, and there's a metal piece that goes over it and a little nut. And he says, that's all we're gonna make. We're gonna become the best in the world at U-bolts. The business has grown 10 times in a few years, 10x, by focus, right? But when you focus on something like that, you now gotta go all over the world to find who needs U-bolts. And that's the new types of opportunities that this has opened up.
I really enjoyed your story.
Thank you.
So with medical device manufacturing, there's some real specific needs, and there's starting to be localized manufacturing centers popping up like GCMI here at Georgia Tech. I was wondering if you think like the MFGcom platform might be a good way to connect customers to places like that.
Yeah, we have a lot of medical device manufacturers that use our system. There's a lot of suppliers that have the right certifications. that use the system. And that's just something we've had to figure out over the years. Like, so one of our largest customers, not in the medical, but in aerospace, is a company in France called Dassault Aviation. They make business jets, fighter jets for French military. So we've had to, build in all the rules of how to cater to the aerospace industry. Same thing in the medical device industry. Right? So all that logic is built in. Intellectual property protection, connecting with the suppliers that have the right certifications. So absolutely, because most of the components really, there's molding, there's micro machining. They then go into the components, and those people are online.
Chrissy has the last question. Hi, I'm Chrissy Cole. I'm a fourth-year business student here. I was just wondering, you were talking a lot about how important it was to serve your customers. How have your relationships with your clients changed since before the cloud and after?
Yeah, you know what? I've got so many customers in different places of the world that it's like any internet business. You have to figure out how to create some sort of a loyalty, affinity, make people passionate, evangelists, and I travel a lot, so I'll spend time across the U.S., all over the world. We have events. I'll do media stuff, and trying to put a face on the company, right? Excuse me. We've got close to 200 employees. There's a lot of stuff that happens behind the scenes. But I constantly will see, post online or something where people think it's two guys in a garage or probably working from home, right? And there's a lot more that goes into it to make that happen. So we spend a lot of time how to humanize, bring a face to it, speak with customers, make it accessible, whether it's phone numbers where they can call us, or email, or live chat, or videos we put out, or seminars around the world. Because it's really easy to not understand your customer, and that's really the death to any company, is when you lose touch with your customers.
Mitch, thank you so much for coming to Georgia Tech today.
Thank you.